Morning, everyone. We had a very productive caucus meeting earlier today. Most importantly, we had an incredibly productive day for the American people yesterday. The bipartisan infrastructure agreement is now the law of the land. That's a great thing for the American people. It's a great thing for the economy. It's a great thing for the Build Back Better agenda. The bipartisan infrastructure agreement will create millions of good-paying jobs for everyday Americans all across this great country, in the North, the South, the East, and the West, in urban America, suburban America, rural America, small-town America, ex-urban America, and Appalachia. It's not a win for Democrats or a loss for Republicans, as some of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle seem to want to frame this tremendous progress for the American people. It's a win for America, delivered with great leadership from President Joe Biden, House Democrats and Senate Democrats, partnering in a bipartisan way with a handful of our colleagues on the other side of the aisle. There are approximately 100,000 structurally deficient bridges in America that could crumble or collapse at any moment. That's just one example of why this historic investment in fixing our crumbling infrastructure will be so significant for the American people. The jobs that are being created as a result of passage of the bipartisan infrastructure agreement cannot be outsourced to Mexico or to China or to other parts of Southeast Asia. These are good-paying American jobs. That's a win for the American people. And we look forward to continuing our work as we advance the bipartisan or advance the Build Back Better Act, and hopefully a handful of Republicans in the House may be inclined to be supportive. That remains to be seen. But as we advance the Build Back Better Act, at some point before we depart, we are going to create additional good-paying jobs for everyday Americans. We're going to cut taxes for working families and middle-class families and low-income families. And we're going to lower costs in health care, particularly by driving down the high cost of life-saving prescription drugs, cut child care costs, cut housing costs, and implement universal pre-K for 3- and 4-year-olds all across the country, and in doing so, cut early childhood education costs as well. Those will be additional wins for the American people, delivering on President Biden's promise to build back better. It's now my honor to yield to our distinguished Vice Chair, Pete Aguilar.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. As the chairman mentioned yesterday, we were pleased to join our colleagues, including some on the other side of the aisle on the South Lawn, as the president signed the infrastructure bill, the American Jobs Bill. And we're so thankful for his leadership, and we're so thankful to be able to go back to our communities and answer the question that they give to us all the time, which is, when are you going to get this done? When are you going to do something to help our communities? And time again, House Democrats have been delivering. And that's what we did yesterday. Investments, as the chairman mentioned, in crumbling bridges and roads, investments in California in our water systems, reducing our carbon footprint, and addressing global supply chain issues by handling the goods movement through the ports of Long Beach and LA. These are things that are going to help California. These are things that are going to help our country. And that's why we're so pleased to be able to go back to our communities and to tell them that we're doing our best to create good paying jobs in this country. As the chairman mentioned, jobs that can't be outsourced, jobs that have to be done here in our communities. But our work isn't done. And so that's what we continue to do, is to lay the groundwork to pass the next piece of the president's agenda, the Build Back Better agenda, that will reduce taxes for working parents, continue to address climate change, make investments in childcare and caregiving. Those are the things that our communities want to see. Collectively, that's what the president campaigned on, and that's what we've committed to deliver. And so I look forward to the work. I look forward to working with my colleagues to get this done, and we'll now introduce Chairman Sean Patrick Maloney.
Well, I thank the distinguished chair and vice chair of the caucus. What I want to tell you is that yesterday was a good day for the United States of America. And if you're rooting against this jobs bill, you're rooting against America. And when Democrats deliver, we are delivering for America. And when the other side complains about it, they're rooting against America. This is not a Democratic win. This is a bipartisan infrastructure bill that will grow our economy and provide millions of good-paying jobs to our families. But of course, our work began earlier this year with the American Rescue Plan, which quite literally saved the American economy. Millions of small businesses and their employees are in business and working today because of that effort. It also put hundreds of millions of shots in the arms of Americans, which is helping to end the pandemic. And we have this week before us the most important investments in our families and in our people since the New Deal, and we will get that done. And together, that will form a record of results for the United States and all of our people that Democrats will be proud to share with our constituents and with those who have doubted whether this government can still work. So I want to thank the President for his extraordinary leadership. I want to thank the Speaker and our Majority Leader and our Whip for delivering these wins. And I thank the gentleman behind me for doing it. What I can tell you is that some of you have heard me call on the White House to go out and sell this package to the American people, to tell the American people what we're doing. We want to do our part. And so this morning we were discussing with our colleagues a new effort where you will see every member of the Democratic caucus go out and do 5 events telling the American people what we're doing in this package. That will be 1,000 events between now and the end of the year, describing why this work that we have now completed on the infrastructure bill and will soon complete on the Build Back Better Act will give people a better country, give them more breathing room for their families, and a future they can look forward to. We are going to stick together. We are going to get it done. We are going to tell them we did it, and we are going to tell them who the other side is. And with those 4 parts of the strategy, we are going to tackle the toughest problems that face the American people, and we want people to know what we're doing. Thank you very much.
Question?
Thanks, sir. I actually have a question for Mr. Maloney as well. I want to ask, you guys have seen a number of Dem retirements come up, and I expect more over the next year before the 2022 midterm. Do you think it's a messaging problem? Is that why you've laid out this plan? Do you think it's a messaging problem with selling these packages to the American people that might make 2022 more difficult?
Well, in terms of retirement, every individual that makes that personal decision to retire from the House Democratic Caucus, we are going to miss and miss their service. And certainly Representative Jackie Spear, an incredible, courageous, bold, fierce advocate for the American people, will be missed. But she's made that personal decision, and she served this Congress, this country, and her communities ably. This is a redistricting year. Sean and I came in a redistricting year in 2012. Pete was a member.
I tried, man.
He tried. But he's a redshirt freshman in terms of being a member of the class of 2012. He came in 2014. But it was 51 of us. 51 of us in 2012. And I believe, Sean will correct me, we picked up 15 or 16 seats that year. That means that the vast majority of the class of 2012 came in as a result of retirements, because that's what happens in a redistricting year. And so we're not even on pace to hit that number yet. We'll see what happens, but this is to be expected, and I don't believe it has anything to do with our prospects in 2022. We're going to hold the House, and we're going to grow our majority, and we're going to do it because of extraordinary leadership, Speaker Pelosi, Sean Patrick Maloney, most importantly, because we're delivering for the American people. Sean?
Yeah, the only thing I'd add is that I think if you look at just exactly what the chairman said, the numbers this year for retirements are perfectly aligned with what happens in pretty much every cycle, let alone a redistricting cycle. So I don't make too much of it. I will point out to you that the most high-profile event that happened was the governor of New Hampshire saying that he wanted no part of what the Republicans are currently standing for here in Washington. And so every person who has retired from our caucus has been 100% supportive of this agenda and is proud of the work they're doing now. And I think most of them would cite it as some of the most important work they've ever done in their careers. But retiring from Congress and serving in Congress is a personal decision. But I don't think the numbers are out of whack with what the historic average is. But you can go check it out. But I don't make much of it.
I'm good.
Yeah.
As you probably know, the polling shows that the infrastructure bill is very popular, but the Build Back Better Act is not particularly popular right now. What is wrong with the messaging around Build Back Better, and how are you going to change that message?
Well, I think the premise of the question is absolutely not supported by the research.
The individual pieces are popular, but when people ask about this act, it is not popular.
Okay, well, we're going to stick together. We're going to get it done, and we're going to tell the people we did it. And I think what you just agreed is that the key parts of this measure, like the infrastructure package, are not just popular, they are wildly popular. We're talking about reducing prescription drug prices, particularly for seniors. That's very popular. We're talking about people paying $35 for insulin who might be paying $1,000 right now. Trust me, that's popular. We're talking about cheaper ways for seniors to stay at home with dignity as they grow older. We're talking about capping people's child care costs, which cripples the budgets of many working and middle-class families. We're talking about help raising children. These are all key parts. The climate change initiatives, electrifying the federal fleet, building hundreds of thousands of charging stations across the country, creating millions of jobs. All of these components of the legislation you're talking about are deeply popular. So look, we've got to, some people want us to sell the drive. I want to sell the touchdown. And we are in the end zone on the infrastructure bill, and we are on the 1-yard line with Build Back Better. And when we describe these achievements to the American public, that will be a record of results that we will be proud to run on. And the American people already understand the importance of those issues in their lives. What's missing is to get it done and to tell them we did it.
I'll go back to this side, and then we'll go back over. Yeah. Second row.
Chairman Maloney, there's obviously seems to be a bit of a disconnect and a problem with the messaging. Voters complain that they don't know what's in Build Back Better, and some of the Democratic members have complained that the White House isn't doing enough to message on it. So what is going to be the shift in the message here?
Yeah, I'll address that first, give Pete a chance to weigh in, and then yield to Chairman Maloney for his observations. But one, the process of democracy is always messy. But as Chairman Maloney indicated, the product is incredibly popular with the American people because we're delivering some historic, important things to lift up the middle class and all those who aspire to be part of it. Churchill once said, democracy is the worst form of government ever invented, except for all forms of government that have ever been invented otherwise. And the process can be messy, but the outcome in passing the Build Back Better Act is going to be so transformational for the American people as we lower costs, as we cut taxes, as we create millions of good-paying jobs, that I think it's going to be embraced not just by Democrats, but by independents and by Republicans.
Yeah, this is a package, as both chairmen mentioned, that is, when we talk in our communities, and all of us spent some time at home last week, when we talk in our communities about what's in these bills, there's overwhelming support. Local mayor spoke yesterday at the White House in my district. Aquanetta Warren, who's a Republican representing small and mid-sized cities. And she gave the president an enormous amount, and Congress and the Democratic House, credit for delivering this. She's been talking about infrastructure for years, and it wasn't able to get done until now. And so she was there with us celebrating, because this is going to mean good paying jobs. This is going to mean so much help in our communities, and we got it done in a bipartisan way. And so, you know, we reject that you know, this isn't popular. Maybe a couple words, you know, folks don't understand in a poll. It's our job. That's why we're going out into our communities. That's why the president and the cabinet are going out into the country to educate folks about what's in these bills, and to talk with them about the specific improvements in bridges and waterways, issues with climate and electrifying stations. Those are the things that our communities are going to want, and those are the things that are going to benefit them and create jobs.
And Congressman Aguilar, just a quick follow-up for you. Has the House Select Committee investigating the January?
Let's do
6th?
Hold on, let's
I'll just stay on topic and we can come back. Yeah. Look, I don't have much to add to what my colleague said. It's our job to tell people what we're doing. It's our job to communicate with the American public. We also take seriously that we deliver these results and then we describe them. As you just heard, we're going to do 1,000 congressional events over the next 6 weeks telling people what we're doing. The president is in New Hampshire today. That's great. He's going to Michigan after that. That's great. Every day he's out there telling the American people what we're doing is a good day. And I hope they have the vice president out there as well, who's a terrific communicator, and the cabinet, so that we have a full court press to communicate with the American public. And while we have a tall order in breaking through the noise, delivering these achievements, and telling people about them, remember, we have a plan to give you a better country. The other side has a ploy to win back power for themselves. That's the difference.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you update us in terms of where the caucus stands on Congressman Gosar? If you're going to move forward to strip him of his committee assignments, will you move forward with the censure resolution?
Well, no decision has been made with respect to how to hold Representative Gosar accountable, but it's clear he needs to be held accountable for his disgusting, outrageous, violent threat perpetrated against one of our colleagues here, Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, as well as the President of the United States of America. But this underscores an incredibly important point. Right now, House Democrats are delivering for the people in meaningful ways related to lowering costs, cutting taxes, and creating millions of good-paying jobs. The House Republican Conference is all about chaos, crisis, confusion, corruption, and controversy. They are trying to sanction members and strip them of committees, not because of outrageous violent threats, but because they supported a handful of them, as in Ranking Member Katko, a bipartisan infrastructure agreement that will make a positive difference in the lives of everyday Americans. This is what the House Republican Conference under Kevin McCarthy's leadership is all about right now. They're out of control. They care nothing about the well-being of everyday Americans, the middle class, and those who aspire to be part of it. Nothing. It's all about the acquisition of power.
Do you think the congressman should be stripped of his committee assignments, and when do you anticipate?
I'm not going to get out ahead of the caucus's decision in that regard, other than to say he needs to be held accountable, and he will be held accountable. Perhaps Kevin McCarthy should take steps to hold Gosar accountable, as opposed to fending off criticisms within his own conference as it relates to sanctioning the 13 Republicans who supported fixing our crumbling infrastructure. That's outrageous.
Sir, there's so much that needs to be done. You know, we have the Build Back Better Act that still needs, the debt ceiling still needs to be raised. Are we going to be able to get this done before the holiday recess?
Well, in my view, and I'll yield to my two colleagues, but we are proceeding full steam ahead. And when we came into this year, I think our focus was to crush the virus, provide direct relief to everyday Americans who are struggling through this once-in-a-century pandemic, and lay the foundation to supercharge our economy for middle-class families and all those who aspire to be part of the middle class. And we've accomplished a lot in terms of that objective. We passed the American Rescue Plan. We've passed the Bipartisan Infrastructure Agreement. And we are going to pass the Build Back Better Act. We also are going to deal with the issues related to the debt ceiling and the need to fully fund our government. The date in front of us in that regard is December 3rd. Under Chairwoman DeLauro's leadership, we've done our work in the House. We need partners on the other side of the aisle in the Senate to complete that work, and hopefully they're going to be responsible.
Just to follow up to that, if I can, just part of the Build Back Better Act, and some people are concerned that they cannot be use some of the funding, federal funding, to send their kids to religious schools. Is that something that the Democrats would consider changing?
Well, that's probably a question that's best directed at this moment to Chairman Bobby Scott, but we'll see where that goes. Thanks.
In 2017 and 2018, you frequently lamented that Republicans speak in headlines and Democrats speak in fine print. How is this any different than the problem you were talking about all those years ago?
Yeah, I didn't lament, but you're correct. I made that observation, and I made that observation because it happens to be anchored in an important reality that sometimes we tend to speak in fine print because we care about governing. And we care about governing because we care about getting things done for everyday Americans. And if you're going to get big, important things done for everyday Americans, like Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, the Voting Rights Act, the Fair Housing Act, the Civil Rights Act, the Affordable Care Act, the American Rescue Plan, and now the Bipartisan Infrastructure Agreement, all initiatives led by Democratic presidents in Democratic-controlled houses and senates. You have to master the fine print. And that's what we've done consistently for everyday Americans. But with Sean's leadership and the DPCC's leadership and Speaker Pelosi's leadership, we also recognize that we're going to have to message, persuade, and communicate in headlines. The Republicans are only interested in tearing down things, not lifting up everyday Americans. And so they speak in these negative headlines over and over and over again. We're going to be very successful in getting these things done, mastering the fine print, and then communicating in a persuasive way, led by Sean and others, what we've done for the American people and why it's been so transformational.
Follow-up, though, a lot of those bills that you mentioned, Democrats didn't get credit for immediately. It took time. It took years before Democrats really were able to turn that into a political victory.
You want to speak, Sean?
Yeah, fair enough. And all you got was a better country. But we're going to change that. And that's why we're doing 1,000 congressional events all over the country, telling people what we're doing. That's why the president's in New Hampshire today, communicating with the American public. We take that responsibility seriously. We don't expect them to know if we don't tell them. That's fair. We're going to tell them. And just to build off what the chairman said, well, my dad used to say, any jackass can kick down the barn. It takes a carpenter to build one. And we're the carpenters in American politics right now. And we're going to measure twice and cut once, but we're going to deliver good policy that grows this economy, creates jobs, ends the pandemic, eliminates the supply chain crisis, brings inflation back down, reshores our manufacturing jobs, and make sure we aren't dependent on foreign energy, and all the other parts that are holding our economy back as we come out of this global disruption. And if we're guilty of caring about the details and getting the policy right, That's why you see some of these robust policy discussions among Democrats. But at the end, we're 100% united. We need to be to deliver these votes. We don't have any margin for error. Worth noting that Franklin Roosevelt had 319 votes in the House when he passed the Social Security Act. He had 100 to spare. We've got 3. That means the party has been historically united, even as we achieve these historic results.
Oh, hold on, let me just go back, and then we'll come back to the front row. But we'll go to this side, and then the back there, yeah. You?
Are you concerned at all about the CBO score perhaps showing a discrepancy in how much Build Back Better will cost versus the revenue that'll raise, particularly related to the IRS, and whether that will have an effect on whether the moderates go ahead and support it?
No, I think, as both Sean and Pete indicated, we've been historically united, and we will continue to be as we work through these important policy discussions amongst the House Democratic Caucus family, but at the end of the day, committed, as we've consistently done, to arrive at the highest common denominator in order to deliver the Build Back Better agenda for the people. I think, President Biden promised 2 things in the context of the Build Back Better agenda on the revenue side. It's going to be fully paid for, and it's not going to cost Americans who make $400,000 or less a dime in additional revenue. We're going to keep both of those 2 promises.
Chairman Jeffries, inflation has hit a 30-year high, and the House is about to vote on this $1.75 trillion bill. What are you telling members who are seeing these numbers and are concerned about it?
Well, I'll speak briefly and then yield to my 2 colleagues. Inflation is a concern that both Democrats and Republicans should be, working to try to address as best as possible on the fiscal policy side. But of course, a lot of the inflationary issues have to be dealt with in terms of monetary policy with the Fed. And they've done a good job, in my view, the Fed, in helping us get through this once-in-a-century pandemic through the execution of monetary policy. And hopefully they'll address these inflationary concerns, which in many ways relate to the COVID-19 pandemic, creating supply chain dynamics. Now, a wide range of economists who have looked at the issue of inflation have concluded, 1, that they expect these are short-term issues, unlike the dynamics that we confronted where we saw double-digit inflation in the 1970s. This is not that. But more importantly, the Build Back Better Act, what we can do from the standpoint of fiscal policy is going to cut costs. It's going to cut child care costs. The average American family spends about $8,600 a year on child care. The Build Back Better Act will reduce that to 0 for working families and middle-class families. The average senior in this country pays about $6,000 per year as it relates to life-saving prescription drugs. We're going to drop that to about $2,000, no more than $2,000. We know the cost of housing has been increasing. We're investing $150 billion in the creation and preservation of affordable housing. And so the Build Back Better Act is going to deal with these cost of living issues in a decisive way, some might argue in a historically transformational way. Pete?
Just briefly, we also saw the president act on this back in California, working with leaders at the Long Beach and Los Angeles ports, addressing the global supply chain, making workers more productive, and as the chairman mentioned, lowering the costs that Americans are paying. Those are issues that are going to help deal and combat inflation, creating jobs, increasing productivity. Those are things that we're going to continue to talk about. There's a role for the executive to play. There's a role for us here in Congress for us to play in addressing this. But we are focused on delivering results for the American public. That's what we're focused on. That's what we go home and talk about, and that's what we're going to continue to do.
Just flag for you the comments of Senator Portman at the White House event yesterday, where he pointed out that this infrastructure package is the most important anti-inflationary measure we've done in recent weeks. Why? Because inflation is when demand outstrips supply. This provides huge investments on the supply side, more efficient ports, more efficient roadways, more systems to move goods and services, to get our people to and from work more efficiently, which reduces energy consumption and demand. So the fact is that a vote against this infrastructure bill is a vote against lowering inflation. And every Republican who voted against this infrastructure bill voted against the most important tools yet to lower inflation, in addition to the specific help that the chairman mentioned that the Build Back Better Act will provide for working and middle-class families in terms of their true costs.
Mr. Schumer is talking about selling oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve in order to lower gas prices. Do you guys agree with that idea?
I haven't taken a look at that issue yet, but it's worthy of consideration.
The Senate is also looking at adding the U.S. Innovation and Competition Act to the defense bill. Is that something that you guys would support? Do you think that the defense bill could pass if UCBO was added onto it in the House?
Does anyone have a perspective on that? Worthy of taking a look at.
Just wanted to ask a quick follow-up on the CBO score, since they said that will be out by Friday. Is that something that you think you guys are going to need to see before a vote on Build Back Better, or are you prepared to sort of take this vote with a lot of the fiscal information that you guys already have?
Well, I think the statement that was issued by some of our colleagues within the caucus on this point was that they're looking forward to additional information from the CBO. It didn't necessarily reference a CBO score. Last question? All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, can I get back to Holmes and Aguilar? And
yeah.
ask,
Thank you very much.
Has the Select Committee made a decision on whether or not you're going to move to hold Meadows or Jeffrey Clark in criminal contempt prior to Thanksgiving?
I won't get ahead of Chairman Thompson and Vice Chair Cheney, but what I will say is that we've continued to say that not cooperating with the committee is not an option, and we're going to use every tool at our disposal to compel people to speak. And not coming before Congress is someone is setting themselves up, as we saw with Mr. Bannon, for potential repercussions. And so we continue to have a thoughtful deliberation about it. The timeline, I'll let the chairman talk about, but we are committed to making sure that we ultimately receive the information that we need to produce a report and a document that talks about January 6th, leading up, rallies of January 5th and January 6th, and the assault on democracy that we all witnessed. So the chairman might have more to say later this week, but the committee continues to have a good, thoughtful, substantive deliberations, and more importantly, we've got over 150 interviews, and so we continue to make solid headway in finding out more information. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.